Maseches Makkos, Daf Beis, Amud Aleph. Today's Daf, right from the beginning. Ketzad ha'idim na'asim zomamim. What is the procedure of how witnesses become scheming witnesses? Right? There's a pasuk says that in the Torah that when somebody comes to court, you need two witnesses in order to prove that they are guilty. Let's say you have liars. Two people come together and they create a scheme in order to get somebody into trouble for something that he did not do. So those two witnesses are called Eidim Zomim. We're going to use that term, Eidim Zomim. Zomim means to scheme. And those are going to be how we're going to describe these two witnesses. If they are, we're going to describe how they become these scheming witnesses and what are the rules about these scheming witnesses. That's the subject of the beginning of our Gemara. So how do these witnesses become Zomimim? So the Mishnah says, Me'idim anu b'ish ploni shehu ben grusha o ben chalutza. Let's say these fellows are testifying about a Kohen, that he is, in fact, the child, his parents, his father, who was a Kohen, married a divorced woman. And if his father married a divorced woman, that makes this Kohen what we call a halal. A halal is a person who's descendant of a Kohen, but cannot do any of the duties or responsibilities and cannot receive any gifts of being a Kohen because his father, he's the product of a prohibited marriage between a Kohen and somebody he's not allowed to marry. Or a ben chalutza. Also a chalutza is that his father married a woman who was, her original husband died, and then was supposed to be, and he died without any children. So therefore, she was supposed to go to his brother and get married, and that's yibum. But they chose not to do yibum, and instead had the alternative chalitza, which is a sort of a divorce type of a separation of that bond. And as a result, she also has the rules of a divorced woman. The Kohen is not allowed to marry her either. So if a child is born of that marriage, the child is also a halal. So these two witnesses decide, we want to get even with our friend, this Kohen. We're not so friendly with the Kohen, right? And so they testify about this person that he, as his father, married somebody he was not supposed to. So, Ein omrim yaseh ben grusha o ben chalutza. We do not say that this person is supposed to become the witnesses are going to become the children of a grusha or the children of a chalutza, tachtov, instead of him. Even if these witnesses were kohanim, right? We don't apply that to him because it would not be universally applicable, that punishment, because it wouldn't matter if the person wasn't a kohen, if his father married a divorced woman. So you can't apply that punishment consistently. Ella, rather instead, loke arbayim, these witnesses are going to get the punishment of 40 lashes. Me'idim anu b'ish ploni, then we're going to testify about this person. Shu chayev legalos, right? Let's say they testify that this person killed another person through negligence, right? They were chopping wood and the axe head flew off and killed somebody else. So they don't testify, right? So they come along and they say, this guy's got to go to a city of refuge. So ein omrim yigol is tachtov. We don't say that these witnesses are going to have to go to the city of refuge. Instead, ela loke arbaim, they get 40 lashes. Okay, and we're going to learn why these specific punishments, these specific incidences, we don't apply the general rule, the regular principle, which is what the Torah says, kasher zamam lasos, that the punishment they're supposed to receive is the punishment that they try to inflict upon this person. If they were testifying that this person's a murderer, then they get the death penalty for trying to give this innocent person the death penalty. If they're testifying that this person owes money, so then these scheming witnesses are supposed to pay the money. But when it comes to these specific testimonies about another person, so then they don't get that punishment, they don't get the same punishment, instead they're going to get 40 lashes. So our Gemara starts off. So, ha-ketzad ein ha'idim nasin zomimim boilei. If you look at the Mishnah starts off, what is the rule of eidim zomimim? And the Mishnah doesn't answer that question. The Mishnah answers a different question. The Mishnah answers the question, what is an example of an exception to the rule of Eidim Zomim? The regular rule of Eidim Zomim is they're supposed to get the same punishment. But in fact, they're not getting the same punishment. They're getting lashes, which is a replacement punishment. So the Mishnah should have started off, what is an exception to the rule of Eidim Zomim? And then told us this example. So the ode, and furthermore, midikatani lekaman, if you flip pages, as we'll see in Mishnayos in a couple of days, that it says, Aval amru lahem heichatem meidim sharei be'oso hayom atem hayisim imanu b'makom ploni harei elu zomimim. That the way that we make, what is the procedure for, there's a process for making these witnesses, for verifying that they are in fact scheming. The way that we know these witnesses are scheming is another set of witnesses comes and testifies that these witnesses could not have witnessed what they claim to have seen because they were with us doing something else at the time they claim that they were witnessing what they said they saw. Got it? So that means that they said on December 5th, we saw this person commit murder. And you say, well, wait a second, you couldn't have, because December 5th, you were with us at Yehuda's birthday party, and so therefore you could not, put it in the phone.
I'm going to wish you happy birthday.
That's right. December 5th, you were with us at Yehuda's birthday party. You could not have seen that. So therefore that is the procedure. So if the Mishnah starts off with, what is the rule of Eidim Zomimim? Then why doesn't it answer that Mishnah? Why does it answer this? And then that Mishnah comes later. So the answer is Tana Hosamkai. Our Tana is continuing with Maseches Sanhedrin. Right? We learned Maseches Sanhedrin, so we are now experts in everything that we were talking about before. And one of the last things that we had learned was Kol HaZomamin Makdinin La'osamisa. We said that when it comes to scheming witnesses, so if they scheme against a person, they get the death penalty that they were trying to get for the person they were testifying about. Chutz mizomei bas kohen uboala, the exemption was the circumstance where a daughter of a kohen, they testify about her that she had relations with somebody, and the rule is that she's supposed to get sreifa, right? We had learned that she gets the punishment of burning. Right? Not literal burning, but they poured lead down her throat. You had to be there. It was a bad punishment. Had to be there. So anyway, she gets that punishment. But meanwhile, only she does. The adulterer who commits adultery with her, the man, he gets the regular punishment of chenek, of strangulation, for committing this adulterous act. He doesn't get the same one that she does. Then we said, well, now the scheming witnesses, since they're testifying that this occurred, so which death penalty do they get? The death penalty for the woman or the death penalty for the man? And we said that since the pasuk says that this is the punishment that she gets, right? And it says, kasher zamam la'asos le'achiv, that they get the punishment that they scheme to give to their brother. You give the punishment that the man would receive to these scheming witnesses, not the punishment that they would have given to the woman. So therefore, those scheming witnesses get chenek, they get strangulation, they don't get sreifa. That was what we had learned in the Gemara. That's a quick review of a Gemara we learned before we got into Perek HaChelek. It's been 3 weeks or so it's been a while. But that was what we said. So she'ein makdimin la'oso misa, right? We don't give these scheming witnesses that same death penalty of the sreifa, of the burning, el lamisa acheres. And instead, they're going to get a different one, the strangulation, because that's the punishment that the man would have gotten. V'yesh edim azom. Now, since that was the last, if you go back, that was the last Mishnah we learned, and then started Perek HaChelek, and took a detour for a moment, and talked about the world to come, and Mashiach, and David HaMelech, and Makkos based David, and all of those things. But that was what we were discussing right before that. V'yesh edim zom macherim she'ein osin bahen din hazama kol ikar. Now that is the case, we now know that there's another type of witnesses that they don't have this rule of Eidim Zomimim apply at all. Not only don't they get the same death penalty, but they don't even get anything. The punishment that they receive is nothing like the punishment of what they tried to give to the person they were testifying against. Ela Malkus Arbayim. Instead, they're going to get 40 lashes. So Ketzad, what is that case? And that's where our Mishnah starts. Ketzad ha'edim nasim zomim. How are our witnesses made zomimim in the way that our Mishnah described before, that they don't get the punishment that they tried to inflict? And it's presumed that you know the rest of that statement because you learned Maseches Sanhedrin. So therefore, that is what's going on in our Mishnah. Me'idim anu be'ish ploni, and our Mishnah continues with that answer that we testify about a certain person, Shehu ben Grusho ben Chalutza, that his father was a Kohen and he married a divorced woman, or his father married a woman who had Chalitza. Ein omrim yaseh ben Grusho ben Chalutza tachtov. We do not say that we make these witnesses a halal as well, just like they wanted to do to this Kohen. Ella lokas arbaim, rather they're going to get 40 lashes. Okay. Yes.
Strangulation is hanging?
It's kind of like hanging. They don't actually do hanging. They have two people, each one grabs a scarf on one side, one person pulls on one side, one person pulls on the other side.
Okay. And what did they use for lashes?
They used, we're going to see the whip that they're going to be describing. There's going to be a whip that we have not actually discussed how lashes are given yet.
Okay.
Right? We saved it. We only did all the death penalties. Yeah, you missed it. It was good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Good stuff. It was a lot of fun.
We were like, ooh, a lot of.
I don't know, so far what I'm learning is really.
Yeah. The world gets real these days. Here we go. Minani Mili. It's okay. So we just said that these people who are the scheming witnesses don't get the same punishment, and instead they're going to get lashes. Where does the Torah say that? So Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, to Amar Kra, the pasuk says, V'asisem lo kasher zamam lo, so kasher zamam, because you're going to give the scheming witnesses the punishment that they attempted to give to the person they were testifying about. Lo, it says you have to give it to him, velo lazaro, but you cannot give these scheming witnesses any punishment that as a result would then harm their children. Right? Because the children didn't do anything. The scheming witnesses themselves can get punished, but not their children. So if you were to establish, let's say these scheming witnesses were Kohanim, and you were to establish them as now prohibited Kohanim, their children would likewise be prohibited Kohanim, and now they couldn't serve either. So that's not fair. You can't hold any, you can't attack, the Torah says that you only are punishing the scheming witnesses, not their children. So that's why. That's why you can't apply it. Technicality, you can't apply it to the schemers. Okay, v'liv sulu l'didei, v'lo liv sulu l'zarei. Okay, so why don't we just say, we'll have a different category, a new category of how this punishment will work. Normally, when a person is a halal, that means not only are they invalid for being Kohanim, but their children can't be Kohanim forever. Let's say, if since we can't do that to the person, we can't make their children illegal, so then let's just say this guy, these scheming witnesses, they can't be Kohanim, but their children can remain fine, right? Let's just make a new thing that they get punished and their children don't. So the answer is that you can't do. Why? Because ba'inun kasher zamam lasos veleka. Because then that would violate the second part of the pasuk. The pasuk says that you have to give these scheming witnesses the identical punishment as what they tried to do. And part of the punishment is for not only this guy can't serve, but all of his children are now ruined. And since you're not going to take it out on this fellow's children, only on the scheming witnesses themselves, that's not an identical punishment. So you can't, since you're not giving the identical punishment, because the Torah says you can't punish their children, now you're stuck. You have to say this whole punishment can't work at all.
But it doesn't even apply.
Doesn't you're presuming the scheming witnesses.
If it's you don't even need the.
That's why I'm presuming that it's just not that it's more straightforward. That even if the scheming witnesses were Kohanim, it still wouldn't take effect.
Right.
Right.
Chomer?
What's
A kalva.
Kalva chomer is what we call is a logical principle where if I know the rule about a lenient case, if I know the rule about a lenient case, then for sure I know in a stringent case that's for sure, right? So let's say, for example, I know that this space where this closet is very small and even a child can't fit into it. So I'm going to say, well, can a grown-up fit into it? No, kal v'chomer, a grown-up can't fit into it. If a child can't fit into it, kal v'chomer, for sure an adult can't. That's the concept of how.
How much more
right?
How much more
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Barpada says kal v'chomer. Here comes our kal v'chomer. Here's how it works. And since I knew we were out, I said, hold on to your question, but we know it's coming up next line, right? So here's the kal v'chomer. Ma mechalel eino mischalel. This is a great one, right? Ha mechalel eino mischalel. If you are a Kohen and you marry a woman who's divorced, right? So then you have a child, and then you divorce from that woman. You don't stay married to that person. What happens to that Kohen? He goes back to being a Kohen as long as he's not divorced, right? When he's married to the woman who's divorced, so then he can't get the Kohen Aliyah, right? He's punished. He can't. But now, as soon as he separates, he goes back to the way it was. Okay.
Say again.
Right?
Reinstated.
He's reinstated.
When is he reinstated?
As soon as he divorces, he separates from the illegal marriage wife. Right.
Okay.
His disqualification is not permanent.
Okay. Great.
Right. So, but the son he has from that marriage is disqualified permanently. Okay?
Doesn't sound fair.
Well, there you go. But these are the rules. Why? Because the son is a product, always a product of the illegal marriage.
Right.
He was in the illegal marriage, that's a problem. When he's not in the illegal marriage, it's not a problem. The son is always a product of that illegal relationship. So the son never comes back, right? It doesn't sound fair, but mamzer and halal and all of these rules are not fair, right? The child winds up getting the punishment for the sin of what the father did. That is true. We will not deny that there's a certain lacking of fairness to the mamzer, to the halal. What did the child do? But in any event, nevertheless, he is tainted by his lineage.
Right.
So now, the mechalel, the one who makes this son, the Kohen himself, who makes his son a halal, this illegal Kohen. The halal is the illegal Kohen. That's the name we use for it. The one who is the Kohen, who makes his son into that, he does not become permanently ruined. He only is temporarily ruined. Right. So now, habal lechalel velo chilal, if scheming witnesses were to come and they attempt to make somebody into a halal, but they are not successful because they were just scheming witnesses and they got caught. They didn't do it. Eno din shelo yischalel. So for sure, they can't be made into a permanent. They can't be made into a permanent halalim, right? A person who actually causes another person to become a halal doesn't become a halal.
Right.
So somebody who tried to and wasn't successful, he also can't become a halal permanently.
Right.
So therefore, without a pasuk, he says, I can say it's logical that scheming witnesses should not become a halal.
Right.
Okay, that's his kal v'chomer. So maskif lo Ravina. So Ravina says, well, there's a problem with your kal v'chomer. Problem with your kal v'chomer is it's fair, that's logical, but Im Kain, if your kal v'chomer is correct, bitalta Torah's Edom Zomimim, then you have destroyed the entire idea, the entire concept of Edom Zomimim doesn't apply. As we're going to go on to Amud Beis, onto the second page.
Right.
Why? Because everybody who is a scheming witness is unsuccessful in giving the punishment that they tried to give, right? Because they got caught. That's what makes them a scheming witness. If they didn't get caught, they wouldn't be a scheming witness. They would be a successful liar, but they wouldn't be a scheming witness. The only way you become a scheming witness is for you to get caught in the act. So, and nevertheless, we give them the punishment. So, maha sokel eno niskal. So, what we would say? We would say that a witness, when we learned last time that when people testify about a person who commits an act that he gets the death penalty, who actually carries out the punishment. The witnesses are the ones who start the punishment, right? So the witnesses who stone the person who is guilty of being stoned, right? So they don't violate any prohibition in doing that. That's actually the mitzvah. They're supposed to do that. So eino niskal, so they don't get stoned because they didn't do anything wrong. They're just stoning somebody for doing the wrong thing, right? Haba liskol, so now Edom zomimim who are attempting to get somebody stoned, lo sikel, but they were not successful. They didn't get that guy stoned because they got caught. Eino din shelo yisakel. So now you're going to use your kal v'chomer and say they can't get stoned either because they weren't successful. They tried and they didn't do it. So therefore, the entire concept of Edom Zomimim becomes illogical. So Ella machvarta kedishanin mekar. So forget this whole thing. So you're happy to hear that. Don't worry about this whole kal v'chomer business. We're going to back what we said. It's a pasuk. Pasuk says we cannot give this punishment to these witnesses. Period. That's it. Okay. Next, the next case in the Mishnah was that the witnesses come along and they say this fellow was negligent. He murdered somebody. So now the punishment that he's supposed to go to the city of refuge. Now, these witnesses, if they get caught and they lied about that, they themselves don't get sent to the city of refuge, despite the fact that they're Edom Zomim, and that should be the punishment. So, Hani Mili, Amar Reish Lakish. So these words, Reish Lakish says, the Amar Kro, the Pasuk says, Minani Mili, where are these words from? Where's the source of the Pasuk? Reish Lakish says, the Amar Kro, the Pasuk says, Hu Yanus. So the person who is negligent, he has to run to an Ir Nidachas. He has to run to the city of refuge to be safe. So El Achas He'arim, he has to go to one of the cities. Who, it says specifically in the pasuk that he does. Who is what we call a miut. It is a limiter. That means that only those who commit negligent murder are punished with the punishment to go to the city of refuge. Velo zomimim, not people who scheme to send somebody there. So therefore, these witnesses cannot get that punishment. So that's it. Pasuk says so. That's the answer.
Are there still cities of refuge?
No. No, that was only a circumstance when there was death penalties and all of those kinds of things in the times of the Beis Hamikdash.
I swear to you, someone told me that San Francisco was a city of refuge.
Yes, different kind of city of refuge. Yes, city of refuge from illegal immigrants, right? That's what they call it. But it is that's why they're probably stealing the term, right? But this was a city of refuge for people who committed negligent murder. So the Torah tells us that the relatives of the murder victim have the right to kill the person who committed that murder. And so he goes to the city of refuge and he has to stay there. And there he's protected. He doesn't, till the Kohen Gadol dies. He has to stay there. Okay, so that's the city of refuge.
Thank you.
Right? Okay. Besides, I think they say sanctuary city, not a refuge, city of refuge, right? Sanctuary city, different. So, okay. Rabbi Yochanan says, Kal v'chomer. He says, no, it's logical. Because Mahu she'asa ma'aseh b'mezid. Take a look. If this person, let's say somebody, who kills on purpose, so eino goleh. So they don't go to the city of refuge, right? You kill somebody on purpose. Murder, right? And if there are witnesses, then he gets the death penalty. What if there's no witnesses? Nothing, right? So if there's no witnesses, well, the court has no case because he's got no witnesses, right? He comes along, walks into court, and he says, I killed somebody, right? So we can put him in jail, but we can't give the guy a death sentence for that, and he doesn't go to the city of refuge for that. So hein shelo asu ma'aseh b'mezid. So these scheming witnesses, they didn't do any action at all, right? They just testified. They spoke. They didn't do an action. Einodin shelo yigalu. For sure, they shouldn't be sent to a city of refuge, right? City of refuge is not that, right? Not that strict. So vehino senes. Well, 1 second though. There is a logic to say why the Edom Zomim might actually still be sent to the city of refuge, even though somebody who actually commits a murder on purpose is not. Because hu she'asa ma'aseh b'mezid lo legally, you think that the reason why somebody who commits murder on purpose doesn't go to the city of refuge, and therefore that's the strict case, right? We're going to say that for sure you should go to the city of refuge, and the scheming witnesses shouldn't because they're a less stringent case. Maybe not. Maybe the reason why somebody who commits murder on purpose doesn't go to a city of refuge isn't because it doesn't rise to the punishment level. It's kihechi delo tehavi le kapara. We have a different issue. Somebody who commits murder through negligence has a punishment to go to a city of refuge in order to get forgiveness, right? Was punishment, that we always have the concept of it, is not just about getting punished, it's actually about getting a forgiveness. So therefore, somebody who commits an act of negligence has the ability to be forgiven by going to a city of refuge and sitting out his punishment there, right? Living under house arrest in the city of refuge until the Kohen dies. That's what he can do. But somebody who does murder on purpose, his punishment is more than that. Therefore, he can't simply go to a city of refuge and take this punishment on and be forgiven. That's not enough. Okay? So if that's the truth, the reason why they can't go to city of refuge is because their crime is actually worse. Then if we can find a crime that's not as bad, maybe they should go to a city of refuge. And that's the Edom Zomim. Hein shelo asu ma'aseh b'mezid. These witnesses that are scheming, their crime is not as bad as somebody who commits murder on purpose. So nami ligu, maybe they would go to exile, kehechi dilahavilu kapara, because maybe they are deserving of getting a kapara. Maybe they can get some kind of a tshuva for what they did, similar to somebody who acted in negligence. So therefore, you couldn't prove it. That's not really a logical proof that you can have. Ela machvarta kid Reish Lakish. So rather, we're going to go back to what Reish Lakish said. Reish Lakish said it's just a pasuk.
I don't understand the argument altogether because that's the whole point of Edom Zomim. Edom Zomim get the punishment that would have been enacted on them. So they should. It does make sense that they get, whether it was somebody has to go to an Hari Miklat, or unlike except for a halal, it makes sense because they're not kohanim, so you can't make them. What is it going to make a difference? Okay, now you can't eat. You can't.
Unlike every other circumstance, you're punishing the Edom Zomimim. This is what the problem was, more strictly than the person who actually committed the act for real, right? Normally with Edom Zomimim, if you claim that this person stole $100, then this person would have to pay $100, and now the Edom Zomimim have to pay $100. Right. Whatever they said, that's the punishment. Now we're saying these scheming witnesses could get a punishment that they would go to an Nir Miklat that somebody who actually committed the murder would not get. That's where the Kal V'chomer came from.
Unless it wasn't amazing. right? If it wasn't, if you say
Well, that's what they're testifying, right? That there was not b'meiz, but we're pointing out that the actual act cannot be less severe than just talking about the act.
So if it was,
And therefore, the answer is it's not that the act is less severe. It's actually that the act is more severe. That's why they don't go to near miklat. So it's not even in the same ballpark, so don't even worry about it. But the reason for the question was the act of murder is clearly more severe than the act of talking about murder. So therefore, if murderers don't go to near miklat, so for sure people who talk about other people being murderers, they shouldn't either. That's the logic, right?
I struggle with it. Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay, Amar Ula. Ula says, Remez leidim zomim min haTorah minayin. Where do you find a hint to this idea of eidim zomim in the Torah? So, Remez leidim zomim v'haksiv. What do you mean? There's a hint. There's no hint. Written right there. V'asisim lo kasher zomam. You do to them whatever they scheme to do the other person. Ella remez leidim zomimim shalokin min haTorah. The question is, where do we see that they get 40 lashes if you can't give them the real punishment? We understood in all these cases that you can't give them the real punishment, but how do you know that the substitute punishment is 40 lashes? Minayin. So where is that? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, V'yitzdiku es hatzadik v'yirshiu es harasha. You have judges, and they declare the righteous person to be righteous and the wicked person to be wicked. V'hayim b'machos harasha. And then you're going to take the wicked person and you're going to give him lashes. Ask the Gemara, Mishum v'yitzdiku es hatzadik v'yirshiu es harasha v'hayim b'machos harasha. Well, what does that mean? Every time judges make a ruling and they find one guy to be guilty, one guy to be innocent, they take the guilty party out and they give him lashes? No, the Torah gives a whole host of punishments. Sometimes you have to pay money. Sometimes you get a death penalty. Why? Every single time you get lashes? Ella, really, here's what's going on. This pasuk is telling us a story behind the scenes. Adim, you had witnesses, Shershiu es hatzadik. They came along and here's the righteous, perfectly good fellow, and they spoke badly about him, and they thought he was a wicked person. V'asu edim achrini, comes new witnesses, v'yitzdiku es hatzadik, and they make this righteous person righteous again by telling us that these witnesses are scheming and false, to make Korah. Just like they put him back to reestablish that he's a good person again. V'shavinu lahani rishaim, and now they make these witnesses wicked. V'hayim bin hakos harasha. Now the wicked people, these scheming witnesses, which are wicked people, then you take them out and give them lashes. So therefore, by reading the pasuk in that way, we now come out to the idea that these witnesses are going to get the lashes. So why go through all of that trouble? Why don't you just read the Torah? It says that you're not allowed to testify falsely. So you testify falsely, it's a lo saseh, it's a prohibition, and the rule is a lo saseh always gets Makkos. If the punishment is not written in the Torah, you get lashes. So the answer is, Mishum dahave lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. You don't get lashes for something called a prohibition that has no action, right? V'chol lav she'ein bo ma'aseh ein lokin alav. If you have a prohibition that there's no action to that prohibition, you cannot get lashes for that, right? Do not, right? If the pasuk says don't do something and then you do it, that's where you get lashes.
Right.
If the pasuk says don't do something and then there's no action, you do it without doing an action, right? That's not a problem.
So
we're going to give a couple of examples.
All lo sasehs would be...
Most lo sasehs have an action, right? Don't do something and then I do it, right? That's where my action is. But is there such a concept of a prohibition where I don't do something? Then I don't get lashes. This would be one of them. Talk considered an action. Talking is not an action. So therefore, if all they do is talk about somebody, right? Lashon hara would be another one. If all I do is talk badly about somebody, I don't get lashes for that prohibition. Right? Don't hate some. Don't be jealous of another person. Right? So the prohibition of don't be jealous is that I wanted to borrow something from him, and then he wants to borrow something from me. So I say I'm not lending it to you because you didn't lend it to me. That's a prohibition. Torah says don't do that. But there's no action to that prohibition. I didn't lend you the axe. Therefore, I violated the prohibition. But that's a non-action. So therefore, if it's a non-action, there's no lashes for that. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned, Dalid Dvarim Nemru Be'edim Zomimim. There are 4 exceptions to the Edim Zomim rules. So we had 2 of them already. Our Mishnah listed the 2 of them. So first of all, Ein Nasim Ben Grusha Ben Chalutzi. You cannot make these scheming witnesses into a halal. Ve'ein Golin Lari Miklat. You also don't send them to a city of refuge, as we said. Other 2 are Ein Mishamin Es HaKofer. They don't pay kofar penalties, right? Kofar penalties are fines. Fines. How do you know it's a fine? We will discuss it in the Gemara. A fine penalty. They don't pay those.
I understand that again. Anyways, yeah. Okay.
Right? So let's see why. Vein nimkar bit eved ivri, and also they don't get sold to be a a Jewish slave, even though the testimony that they would have given would have caused the person they were testifying about to be sold into slavery. We're going to learn about why that is as well. Rabbi Akiva adds on, Af ein mishalmin al pi atzman. They also cannot pay because of themselves. So we'll see what that means. That means, let's say, for example, these witnesses are found to be Eidim Zomamim, and then before they pay, they go to another court and they run away. And then they feel bad about it. So they go into a court and they say, we are turning ourselves in. We are Eidim Zomamim, and we owe this guy $500. We're turning ourselves in. They do not pay based on the admission of themselves. That's where Rabbi Akiva adds. Now, why are all these cases? Hang on, that's the next Gemaras. So that's why I don't understand
we said
why.
Anyways, anybody who's modeh a crime as well, right?
We're getting it.
Right.
Hang on. Okay. Hang on. I told you, hang on. Don't ask the questions on those. Okay, we're going to go through one. We have four, and Rabbi Akiva is a fifth case. Ein nasim ben grusha ben chalutza kedamar. We already explained why they can't be a ben grusha ben chalutza. That we already explained. The pasuk says, "Vasisim lo kasher zam." Can do it to him, can't do it to his offspring, right? Ve'ein golin lari miklat kedamar. We already explained why you can't go to an ir miklat, right? Because it says who, right? Who yanus, right? So that's it. Ein mashamnes a kofer. So you can't pay a kofer. Why? Kasavri kufra kapara, because this opinion holds that paying a penalty, a financial penalty, is the atonement for the crime that you committed. V'hani la b'nei kaparininu. These people never committed that crime, and therefore they can't get an atonement for the crime that they're testifying about. Therefore, giving them a financial penalty that atones for a crime that they didn't commit makes no sense. Therefore, they're going to get the punishment of lashes, which is the atonement for the scheming crime, which they did commit. Man tana kufra kapara. Who is this opinion that holds that payment is going to be? Well, we'll stop here. We'll go into a conversation about who is the person, who are the opinions, but we'll stop here.